Okay, so pansies are starting to go in the ground. Our perennials are starting to look good and starting to break dormancy, and gardens are finally starting to come alive a little bit. Let's talk about fertilizer and how to keep those plants happy and healthy all season long, and really a little bit of should it be using a synthetic fertilizer or an organic fertilizer. Let's talk about it. Okay, so 25 years ago when I was in my horticulture class, one of my professors and I started this big debate over organic or synthetic. And what that basically means, simplistically saying, synthetic fertilizers are more scientific formulated, not naturally found. Organics have to go through a whole process to be certified organic. Now, the way they work is really the biggest difference. Plants in general need three major elements in large quantities: nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. So every fertilizer you look at has three numbers listed on it, and that's the ratio of those nutrients, because that's what plants need in the largest quantity. Now, not to get too deep into it, but what's the biggest difference between synthetic and organic? In my experience, synthetic releases the food right away, gives the plant exactly what they need. Many times commercially growing, like when we're growing all our hanging baskets, annuals, perennials, most of the time, most companies are using synthetics because we can control right to the nutrient. However, when it comes to gardens and the plant, I switched to organics because the professor argued for synthetics, and he said that doesn't matter what form you put it down, organic or synthetic, the plant only takes up the same nutrients. However, once I started getting into the world and using organics in the landscape, I found they just work better because organics are kind of feeding the soil, and they tend to be a little bit more well balanced. And I find that it just makes, we're trying to feed the soil, which then is feeding the plants. So it just seemed to work better. So I am not a diehard organic for the sake of organic. I still use synthetic on most of our annuals because it gives me control. But this is a different environment than when the plants are in the ground. Once our plants are in the ground, we are 100% organic for the most part. There are a few plants that may need different requirements, so we'll mix it up. But by and large, we just use a plant called Plant Tone. And so Espoma, in my experience, makes a great product. We've never switched off of them because it's well balanced. They were one of the originators of organic fertilizers, and they just seem to work well. So to me, figure out what your plants need, figure out if there's any special requirements, and if you don't know, I'm going to show you a trick on how to not really have to worry about what you're putting down, how you're putting it down, but more just to put it down on a regular basis. Would that help? Let's take a look. Okay, when it comes to fertilizers, it can be a little intimidating because there are just so many of them. Lawn fertilizers, liquid fertilizers, houseplant fertilizers, and aisles of different types of fertilizer. Espoma is my go-to. So basically, this is just a well-balanced. Most of their product lines are all organic. Some are just more naturals, and they just didn't go through the certification process. But for the most part, Espoma, in my mind, not only is it just a good all-purpose fertilizer, but it also has already been inoculated, many of the formulations, with the beneficial bacteria and fungus that are naturally found in the soil. So they have a product called Biotone. Think of it as just a bunch of microorganisms that are in the soil that are going to help break down the fertilizer, making sure that that becomes readily available for the plants to take it up. But what I love about their line is they've really made it easy to figure out what to use. So basically, if you have a vegetable garden, I'm using vegetable tone. If I have roses, I'm using rose tone, so on and so forth. You get azalea tone, holly tone. These two are our two biggest players. So when I said I wanted to make it easy for you, this is what we use on all the lawns and gardens that we take care of. If I'm every spring and sometimes in the fall, we'll go through, if we're just giving the entire property a good fertilizer, if it is a plant, you can put Plant Tone on it. So for the most part, that is their all-purpose generic fertilizer. So when we go out to do a spring cleanup, all we're using is Plant Tone. And on the back of the bag, it makes it very easy how much product to apply per size bush that you're trying to do it, and whether it's a new planting or established planting. But for trees and shrubs, there we're going through and we're just applying Plant Tone. If we are doing flowers, perennial gardens and annual gardens, many times we're doing this monthly to go through, but it's a nice slow release. We've never had problems of people reporting any burning because just the way the organics work. So this is all purpose. Holly-tone is probably our second biggest seller, but it's not just for hollies. This is a product that is pretty much for most evergreens, but acid-loving plants. So there is a slight acidifier inside there. It's basically the same fertilizers, but with a slight acidifier. And what I find with these is it's not as necessary here in southern New England because our soil tends to be naturally acidic. If I'm optimizing for evergreens, yes, I will go with a holly-tone. But for the most part, 99% of the time, we're just going through plant tone and making it as simple as possible. And then we're fine tuning when we get into the ones. If you're looking for organic lawn fertilizers, we carry the complete line for Espoma organic lawn fertilizers. That's a conversation for another day. Organic lawn fertilizers, I'm still a fan of synthetics, but if you want the organic route for lawn specifically, we carry it. It's a great product, but properly using them will determine your outcomes. But that's it. This whole line is a great line. Can't go wrong with it, and it keeps it much more simple than trying to dig into the needs of every little plant. Okay, we can babble all day long about fertilizers and trying to optimize, but it can get overwhelming. And we know that some of you do. You love your plants, you dig in, you want things optimized for each plant. In my experience, it's just not that necessary. Proper location, dividing the plants, maybe getting compost and organic matter into the soil, well, in my experience, is much more beneficial than trying to optimize your fertilizers. We go through and incorporate compost and prep the soil, get the soil as nutritious and healthy as possible. The plants are much more resilient. And then just put down your all-purpose fertilizers. It doesn't go wrong. Our flowers are annuals. They love it. And it's just what works for us. I hope it works for you. Take care.